Oh, here we go again. Obviously the guitar's now finished. It's been cleared, sanded back. Obviously I wasn't going to film any of that because that's just like so tedious and time consuming. You'd be there for days. But she's come up good for a first attempt. It's come up actually very good. All the edges. Probably still needs another polish. Polish will obviously remove any little blemishes, any little marks, but it's actually quite smooth. So she's actually come up very good. I'm just doing a dry run now where I'm actually going to fit the neck just so that I can see all my measurements in lengths. So generally on a Fender Stratocaster you should have 25.5 inches from the inside of the nut to where the string is bending over the bridge. So as it's going through, and it's measured to your bottom E, so your bass E, your 6th string. So once it goes over that little area there, and she bends over that one, and that's where you're taking your measurements to. So I'm just doing a very dry test fit here to make sure that everything's lined up. So all holes are lining up on the bridge, so she's sitting perfect. A little bit of play in there as well, which is good. So you've got a little bit of measurements, a little bit of adjustment if you need it. The neck is in as far as I can physically get it in, so she's right up, pushed up hard against that. I'm just grabbing a tape measure. It's one that self-locks, which is really good because you can actually let go of it and have a good play of where everything's at. So 25. And that is hard up against that nut right at the end. Actually, she's just slid forward a little bit. That's better. She's now sitting nice and hard. Just don't put too much pressure on that. So based on that, 25.5 inch, exactly right between the two Allen keys, right where it bends over the bridge, where the actual strings start deflecting through the cavity. So that is perfect, 25.5 inches. If it's in millimeters, obviously it becomes 646 millimeters. And you can also measure from the end of your nut to the dead center of your 12th fret. So not in between the fretboard itself, right in the middle of the fret. You'd have to eyeball it. In theory, should be like 13.2 something inches, so you know you're on the money. And then it should be the exact same measurement going back the other way, so 13.2, so exactly the same between the 12th. So your measurements between the 12th fret going to your nut, going back to your bridge should be identical. But your total length should be 25.5 inches from the end of your nut, so right on the inside of that edge. Take measure up to there, and just as you're going over that bridge, this is on your bottom E, because obviously you can then adjust your intonation on the other bridge plates as you start adjusting and tuning up. You can get your intonation correct. As long as your first bottom E string is at 25.5 inches, you can then work away from that. You've got to have that bottom string. Make sure that your scale length is correct. So this is correct from what I've read and what I've studied. It's telling me it's correct. So I'm doing a dry run. So I've got the bridge just sitting in there exactly where it should be going. I'm just going to grab the pick guard because it's already pre-wired the way these things come in. I mean, the only wire that's actually got no plug on it is the green wire here, which would be a ground wire, which would obviously ground on the back of going through the body of the guitar, which is through here. And on the other side there would be a claw, the spring claw that puts tension against this bridge. This would either get clipped in there, which I've had a look at it. It just looks like it's like a little notch. I would most likely solder it, because that way I know it's never ever going to come away. The key on this is to make sure that all your wiring is seated. You don't want wiring being squashed or pinched against the body of the guitar somewhere. So I'm just doing a dry fit by just getting these through. Now this is part 2 to the video. Obviously part 1 was the preparation of the body, spraying it, clearing it. I had a couple of runs which I had to knock back. I used the blade very slowly over a period of time to get those runs back to the body as close to level as perfect. And then I just used 400 grit, which was quite worn already because I'd used it prior, so it was clean, and I used that to knock those back as low as I humanly could get them. And then I'm just pulling this neck out just so she can see, because she is going to go underneath. And there's probably a wire still caught under there somewhere. This is still covered in plastic, this pick guard, so I'm not worried about damaging it, as it should pretty well do its job. Okay, so you need to come across here and use go in there. Okay, that's better. Okay, so she's sitting quite nice. I'm just going to line her up with the holes that were pre-drilled on the body, because that was a good thing about this kit, is everything came pre-drilled. And they all should line up, which they do. I'll slide her in. You want to make sure there's a good, that the pick guard's not bouncing up against your bridge, so there should be plenty of movement to slide her back to where you need her. So that's all working. So that seems to be fitting, and you get a general idea now how the guitar is actually looking. I'm going to find somewhere here in the little box of tricks is the input socket jack. Now, from what I've read online, everyone says to make sure they're adjusted, make sure these are tight, because sometimes they don't fit in the body properly. In the once you've got an input jack socket coming through, they can hit in the body. I've dry fitted this the other day and it seems to be okay. So the sockets now come through for that, which is here, and you can see the pick guard moving. Technically it's only a one-way socket, she can only fit one way, so it'll be a male or a female. You plug her in and away you go. I'm making a dry fit because I just want to see what's going on with this. Obviously I'm getting close to completing it, so I'm probably getting a little bit more excited than the viewers because it's the first one I've ever done, so I want to see what she feels like and sounds like. I just get her in there loosely just to get an idea without damaging anything. She can just sit there loosely. All these holes are lining up. She will fit in there quite well. Obviously I've got a socket in there still bouncing around, so that's why she's not sitting completely flat, but that'll all go in there nice. And there's plenty of room behind that socket from what I can physically see. I've probably got half a finger length for the socket to go in. You know, technically what you've got to be worried about is one of these jacks going in and then bouncing up against the body, but I've got plenty of room from what I can see, plenty of drift, and it's not going to bounce on the body. I've got plenty of room, so I don't have to adjust anything. Everything's come pretty well as promised. I've got the camera up here on the amp at the moment, just sitting here because it's the furthest point I can get away from this desk. So at least there is footage of me, half my head in here. Obviously I want you to be able to see the guitar as well, but just doing a dry fit, everything seems to be perfect. Probably my next step is to get that bridge down. I'm not going to screw it fully down. Some people prefer to screw the bridge all the way to the body tight. Everything that I'm reading is telling me to screw it down and allow that bridge to still be able to flex. So you're obviously you can get a little bit more movement on the strings when you want to bend them with the tremolo bar. So I'm only going to screw it down just till it's nice and flush and it's not fully seated tight, so he can still float around a little bit. And then I'll get this pick guard on because all the wiring's pulled through now, and then we'll get the claw on. So that's what I'm going to be doing now. So I just need to find the original screws. Okay, so those big ones are obviously for the neck. That's the claw. There's the springs. This kit came with three springs. Obviously your 4 big screws are for your neck, for bolting your neck on. Obviously there's a claw in there, and you can see by that little latch in there. It's hard to see through the plastic, but there is a little latch in there that'll lock down that string. I am going to solder it down just for safety. 1, 2, 3, 6. What are they for? Okay. There could be spares actually in there. Here we go. Good thing about this kit, it actually came with a spare nut. And there's the small Allen key for it as well to adjust the bridge height. There's already a nut installed, but there is actually another nut on here. So they have actually given me another nut, which is good. I think they're around the same height. I mean, obviously all of that, once the strings are on it, I'll be checking the heights and what sort of height that I want the strings at. I prefer to have it slightly lower, just easier on my fingers, obviously because I'm still learning. I've only been playing on and off for over a year, so obviously I'm going to try and save my fingers. Okay, so this little one at the bottom, all these little screws here, obviously for the pick guard. But I should in theory have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 longer screws, which I think is for the bridge. I wouldn't have thought they were that tall, but I could be mistaken. The only thing is I don't label the bag, but you know by the amount of strings, by the amount of screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 6 quite large screws. And they obviously wouldn't have done, because I've used 6 on here already. I've already pre-installed the tuners on. So the tuners are actually on, and they were little screws for the back, and there were 6 of those. So I know they're not mucked. I haven't mucked that up, and I haven't messed them up because obviously I wouldn't be putting big screws on the headstock, otherwise they'd go through. But I'm presuming because the amount of tension on this bridge that the screws are going to be quite big. So there's 6 in there. Alright, I would presume these 6 are for that. Because they are quite a heavy, they're obviously going to have to hold a bit of tension, so I'm presuming this is what these are for. It's the only area second area that has 6 screws physically on it. So they're all in there. And then we've got a washer. And there's a washer already on there, which is good. I haven't lost one. I'm just putting these strap buckles back into the packers. I just don't want to lose anything because I'm not here every day. Tedious little things. I just don't want to go in the bag. You would have thought they would have had individual bags for everything, but it's obviously the way they do it. And their washers are just like felt. So that's there like that. We are going to, key on these is not to over screw and don't damage the heads of the screws. Otherwise you're in big trouble because you're going to have to reseat them. I always do a dry run. I always want to make sure that the Phillips head on these is seating really correct, so that there is no pressure where I'm going to be threading and damaging the head of the screw. So this is a broad tip, so this is probably perfect for this. And I'm going to just put one in without the bridge on there. I just want to see this screw going through. Presume it'll be right, as it does. It's been pre-drilled, so they've already got a pilot hole, and that would be absolutely perfect. So that's them there. Perfect. All right. Yeah, as I said, she's quite solid. It is a two-piece. You can see the screws on the inside in there. There's three of them. They lock this plate to the top plate, and there's no movement in those, so they're all nice and tight. Just while we're here, we might as well double check them. They are definitely going anyway. Oh yeah, they're perfect. Don't muck around with them. Alright. Maybe that's not the right one. It doesn't like it. I'll go something a little bit broader. It's my only fear is I don't want to be threading screws. No. That even doesn't like it. Could have sworn it was a broad one. How broad of a tip do I want? That's definitely not it. Always important, make sure you got the right Phillips head. You don't want to be stripping them. She's still not sitting right. That's the first one. See, she's not as deep. Well, they're going in nice and slow. What I'll do is I'll pause it. I'm just going to get them in properly because I'll probably have to stand and just get them in there nice and seated, just down to the bottom of the plate. So there is still a little bit of movement in this bridge wanting to move. which is good. I'll be back in a couple of secs. All right, that bridge is in. I've screwed them down, but I'm not overly tightening them. They're just hitting the face of the plate, so they're just in there now. I'm just going to make sure everything comes through now from the wiring. Then we'll get the pick guard on. Seems to be all seated properly there now. And then I'll put the claw on last. So the pick guard is obviously the bag with the most amount of screws, because that's the one that everything I've watched on it was the ball terror, because it was like individual little screws, just over 16 screws or whatever it is. It's almost when you build one of these kits, you get impatient because you want to get it complete to see what it feels and looks like and play it. But obviously go careful, go slow. I did change screwdrivers as well, because the kit that I've got has a lot of different tips on it, but one of those tips just looks like it was a little bit worn. So it was trying to spin, so I ended up going to a trusty screwdriver that's obviously that's a Craftex screwdriver, so it never gets damaged, so there was no issues of it trying to bounce out. All these are coming out slowly. So these are a lot smaller, so these will take a smaller screwdriver. 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14. It's actually a lot more than that. It's about 20 screws. Yeah, 20 screws for the pick guard, from what I can see. Again, same principle. See what's going to be the best tip for the screwdriver. This one does have some fine tips. Actually, this one, this actual trusty screwdriver seems to be a better fit than all of them. I'm just getting them in, not all the way down. I just want to get them all seated so that they all line up. They all line up properly. There's plenty of space between it and the bridge. So there's no alignment issues so far, from what I can see. Their process with their templates, how they've pre-drilled everything, is actually quite good. So Victoria at the moment present, it's Sunday the 24th. Obviously I'm in retail. So we're technically now allowed to serve people outside, but nothing in the showrooms yet. So obviously I deal with motor vehicles, so it is just interesting to see finally you got some sort of normality back when it comes to working. But still not back to normal as such. Yeah, interesting times ahead for everyone. easier. The ones on the bridge, the pre-drilled holes were more of a guide hole. They were probably a little bit small for my liking, but they worked. It went in. I'm going to stagger some of these because I want to see what this alignment's like. I'm getting them in about 90%. I'm putting them down, and then I'll tighten them up as I get closer. Yeah, it's very exciting to get to this point where you're, it now looks like a guitar, not just a slab of wood. So that one's a tad out. It's only one that's a little bit askew. It'll find its way. As long as you get them in straight. I think some of these are for the back plate as well. So there should be 6 on the back plate. There should also be 2 for the audio plug. There's only 3 more on here, one up near the bridge, this one on the end and one on the corner. And that's it. So I've already threaded through the audio plug, the jack, so you can see. It's hard to see on the camera, but there is a red lead just hanging there. You can probably just see it in front of my finger. So she's already through. The green earth is already through the other side, and I've pulled that through as far as I could pull it without breaking it. So I know she's through. I think the way it was packaged too, it's got a slight bow in it. Obviously it'll go down once it's all screwed in. So I can feel it in the center here, but it seems to be okay. Okay, so she's in. Last but not least, this is the one that was a tad out. We're just keeping her straight. Okay, she's found her way. You just don't want them going in sideways. Okay, so she's home. Just till they snug. You don't want to be over tightening them. Yeah, you don't want to be threading timber because it's where you start having to use dowels and obviously glue and fill your holes and then redo your pilot holes. I'm just pushing on the pick guard down just to get her flat, so I know she's now seated. You're still with me because it is a little bit tedious. She's in. So if I'm now right, I should have 2. Sometimes I've noticed they give you a spare screw too. 6 and 2, and then there's a spare. So there'll be 2 for the jack, the input jack. Everything's around the pickguard. I haven't missed anything that I can see. And they look like the same screws that actually hold your pickups down too for your adjustments. So there might be a spare screw. There you go, you can just hear it seat now. That's it, that's all gone flat. That's for the pickup. And then we'll eventually get to that point where we've got to set up heights and make sure that it's playable. Looks like they've already sort of preset the pickups to be obviously lower on the low E, the 6th string, and then they're a little bit higher on the E because obviously the strings are thicker, and then they go lower down the bottom to number 1 string. Looks like they've sort of prejudged that already. Hence why they call them a kit. They obviously don't want you to do too much of adjustments. The other thing you want to be careful with too with all your pickups is any of your filings, anything coming from metal, you don't want them on your pickups. So sometimes it is I've got a brush in here somewhere. It is good practice to get everything away from those pickups. You're going to get a little bit of filings away from the nuts, because they're not the strongest screws in the world. They will break down, but you don't want any metal filings in because they're magnetic. Obviously they're going to pick up vibration and not sound right. Whenever the kids' daughters get rid of these things and they're still clean, I grab one. It's the most softest thing that you can use. Doesn't damage anything. All right. That is seated. Perfect. Nice. So the plug can only go one way. And you can hear her going home. So she is in. We're just getting the jack on now because obviously that's going to allow me to finish the top half, the front half. Next we're going to be putting the neck on. Yeah, just when I was reading the book off camera, it was always indicating to have all your tuners on first. So that way you're not playing with the neck, with the weight of it. You just get them on and then line them all up. They seem all right. funny with these kits, you want everything to be aesthetically correct, like look right. Even on here I can see some filings coming away from the screw. That's why I got the little brush out there. Okay, don't over tighten, Paulie. The moment it tightens, I just give it a little twig after that, and that's it. Make sure she's seated. That's it. Nice. You can even see, you probably can see that on camera, there is a little few black specks. That's obviously coming from the screws themselves, because they are fairly light. I said you could change the screws and go to something a lot more heavier duty, a lot more hardened. But for this purpose, perfect. You're not going to be unscrewing them every day, so you won't get them in once. You won't have to ever take them off again if you set everything up right. Okay. So we now have the jack in. We have the bridge in, and the bridge is not, I haven't fully tightened it all the way down. I've just, where it just seated, and that's just where I've left it, because I do want it to have a little bit more, a little bit of movement, and not be just fully seated down where it's not going to spring back. It's nice. And obviously I can adjust them up once I put the claw on and the springs. So that's this first stage. So we're in part 2 of the video. Obviously now we've got a relatively complete guitar. Yeah, just got to peel away the plastic off the pickguard. I'll probably do that last, just because it'll still protect it while I'm still mucking around with it. We'll adjust up this neck now, and we'll get the neck on. I lined everything up roughly with the neck a few days ago. It seems to line up straight. I had some string running on both sides to make sure the gaps on each side from, say, the bottom E and the top E string, that the gap on the actual fretboard was relatively close to normal, like everything looked aligned. So I think we'll be all right on that side of it. But yeah, we'll get this neck on, and then this, we'll call that quits on part 2. Okay, so these are spares. I'm not going to try and lose any of these things, so someone's on the actual telephone. I can actually hear people talking in the background. It's my oldest and the granddaughter. So just off camera, I'm going to get rid of these screws. I'm not going to waste your time and mine into the bag, as these are obviously for the back string protector plate, and there's a spare in there. I'll just pause it and then we'll come back. Here we are back again now. We've now got the guitar back on its underside, so it's now facing up backwards. The neck is in, completely solid. We've got our plate, which is about to go on it, the backing plate. Now, everything that I'm watching, everyone doing these, all remove the cover. I don't know, because it's like a plastic resin. Maybe it has a little bit of give there, so you get a bit of flex through the body of the neck. So I'm not using it either. I'm just using the plate so that I know the plate is hard against the body. And all the pictures now, you don't normally see a cover on them anyway, so I'm just going the same as everyone else. I think it looks better without it anyway. You know it's going to seat properly. Again, with these big screws, you want to take it really easy, really careful. You don't want to be threading these. The only other thing I've noticed on this kit, and seems to be a common thing with all the kits, is the spring claw. There is no holes in the body, but I've already marked up some holes in there. So I will eventually get the drill out and some long drill bits and get them in there and just make sure that they're only just a pilot hole so that these spring claws can go right in, which is these two here, the little ones. So they're a decent length. I will mask off so that I'm not going full depth. I'll only get probably 3/4 of that depth. And we'll get that going as well, so at least the spring claw has some holes in there because there's no holes on it, so obviously they're going to have to be made as well. I'm just going to make sure with this neck that this neck is all the way in and is all the way seated. She ain't moving anywhere. Once I start them, I'll be able to. They're definitely biting in now because I can feel that pulling. And now it's a complete guitar. All the electronics are in. As I said, the only thing I'm going to be doing is soldering the earth wire to the claw. Get my springs in, and I'll start adjusting to what sort of how the bridge is going to sit on it. They're only just starting to bite, which is good. Fun. Just making sure this screwdriver stays seated. I don't want to be threading anything. We can adjust them around. They will seat once we get them home. I'm just alternating to make sure the tension is right. I'm not going any tighter than that. I'm going corner to corner at the moment, so I'm keeping that distance pretty well the same so that they can all tension down at the same. I can hear my granddaughter in the background screaming and crying. That means my oldest has arrived, and that's it. We now have a complete guitar. Yeah, very nice, very smooth, beautiful weight. So sitting there. So there we have a complete guitar at the moment. The next thing is to string it, drill out the claw spring. So she has 2 holes in there for the claw spring, and then yeah, we can get to stringing her up and seeing what she feels like, what she sounds like. It's going to be the most important thing, isn't it? So there, now we have a neck attached to the body. She is solid as. Lovely. Lovely. So yeah, so far so good. All right, we're back again. So drill bit masked off to the depth that I wanted at. Obviously control the depth so you're not going through the body. 2 holes have now been put in now. Put a little bit of tape just to protect the body, just in case my steady hands moved a little bit and I hit against the body, which I haven't, so it's pretty well right. The cover plate's going to cover anything. If you do hit an edge, you will cover plate will protect it, will hide it. Just going to get rid of these drill bits. Drill's already on the ground. Got one of these work zone drills from Aldi, absolute sensational. It's probably one of the best drills I've actually owned just for a brushless motor. It's a titanium work zone. So it's an Xfinity Plus battery, 4HH, so it's got plenty of power. I haven't charged this thing in over a year and it's still got about 70% left. 58% now. So we'll need a charge eventually. We'll get rid of these. We're going to put these spring claws in. Spring claw, singular. Now we've got a complete guitar. You just got to be careful now with your screwdriver that you're don't damage the body or your hard work. Now these ain't getting screwed in all the way. I'm only going to put them in probably 3/4. Because they'll, under tension, I'll be able to get the springs in. They are on a slight angle because obviously you can't get your drill into that perfectly flat, but they are a little bit on a slight angle. This tip used to be magnetic. For some reason it's lost their weight. You can always remagnetize it. I don't know what tension I want them at now. It's probably because the screws are slightly drifted. They're just both of them probably a little bit on a slight angle. Plate will eventually come past. Put some pressure on it. I can hear someone outside the door. You can come in if you want. I think it's that one that's drifted a little bit. That's better. Okay, so now they're sort of floating here, which is what you want. Okay. So there's our wiring for the earth. And we'll get this one underneath. Okay. So springs. Just got to be careful because I've opened up these bags. So some of the stuff wants to fall out now. I just don't want to lose all the bits and pieces. 3 springs. Obviously with guitars you can add more springs if you feel like you want a little bit more tension. I'm not going to know because I'm not a professional player, so I'll work it out as I'm going. What's better for me? You always got to watch your eyes on these things too, because they do like to. Here we go. So she was seated. A pair of pliers would help. It's just all dust. I'm right-handed, but I can use my left. Still reckon these claws, they're not very bent. They're sort of, yeah, they're quite, it's almost like the springs will fly off them under a bit of, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. She doesn't want a seat, does she? Okay, so now we've got, that's better. That's much better. We've got one on now. Yeah, all the claws at least doing what it's meant to do now. It's just a bit hard when your hands want to pop up against the side. She's in. Still, that one doesn't want a seat. Alright, she's gone in now. that's it. She just wants to be stubborn. So I'm doing three springs just from the ends to the center. There they are. All three are in there now. My wiring is underneath the springs, but I am going to fetch her through, because eventually I can still solder it by getting to that section. So yeah, all my wiring will just get pushed underneath, and then she'll just get soldered on the top. You can see the general idea there now. As you can see there, she's all on. The wire is underneath. I just got to get her on to that little piece on there, and we'll just drop a bit of solder on it. That way we know we've got a really good earth, because you certainly don't want it coming off. Probably the next thing I'll do is I'll put on the guitar strap ends, and then yeah, we'll get up to the next stage.